Let's get our feet wet. Let's get our feet wet. Let's get our feet wet. Oh my God.
This is a map of Vancouver today, and this is a map of Vancouver in 1893. Notice anything different? Well, here's what I see. Streams. There, and there. And that's just scratching the surface. According to historian and biologist Sharon Proctor, there were once more than 50 streams that used to run all over this land.
Today, most of those streams have long since disappeared, but recently, they might be making a comeback. Let's get our feet wet.
To start this story, I wanted to track down one of those streams. On the map, there's one running from Trout Lake to Falls Creek. Its ending point is supposed to be at the corner of Windsor Street and East 7th. And when you get there, there are some promising clues. There's a China Creek Park, a China Creek Housing Co-op, even a China Creek Skateboard Park, but no China Creek itself. Well, after some research, I think I finally found where it is. Are you ready? This is China Creek. What happened is that China Creek was buried underground. In 1951, the water was directed into a pipe and covered up, and that seems to have been the fate of most of Vancouver's historical streams. They were considered a nuisance and a flooding risk. Covering them up created more space for other things like buildings, roads, and parks. So one by one, these streams were covered up. But not all of them. If you get off at Rupert SkyTrain station and follow this path next to the Superstore, you'll see it, one of Vancouver's last streams, Still Creek. And Still Creek is huge. It travels from here in East Vancouver through Burnaby before finally pouring out into the Fraser River in New Westminster.
I think there's a very interesting question here. Why was Still Creek saved? Well, Still Creek was one of the last few streams remaining in Metro Vancouver by the 1990s, and by that point we'd realized something. Covering up a stream or river actually leads to a lot of problems.
When rain falls on Vancouver, it usually hits a hard surface like concrete or asphalt. That means it moves very fast and doesn't get absorbed by the ground. It's kind of like we have Gore-Tex on our buildings and streets. That water flows into these storm drains that take them into pipes, which then take them out to the sea. And well, the thing about pipes is that they aren't flexible, and if there's too much water coming through, they can't handle it. The result? Flooding. This is already pretty common in Vancouver, but with climate change expected to increase the average rainfall here by 11%, it's about to get a lot more common. There's another issue here. A lot of the rainwater that goes into the storm drains is actually combined with our sewage. Another thing that we thought was a good idea back in the day was to combine sewage and rainwater into one pipe. Back then, our sewage went straight out into the ocean, and because rainwater was headed there too, it made a lot of sense to build one pipe for both instead of two separate ones. But then we had the brilliant idea of maybe not flushing raw sewage into the ocean, and so we built treatment plants to clean that wastewater. All great stuff, but where it becomes problematic is when you add rain into the mix. You see, sewage and rain are very different in two key ways. First off, rainwater is much less toxic than sewage and doesn't need to be cleaned at a treatment plant. Rainwater is also much less predictable than sewage. The amount of sewage in Vancouver at any one time stays relatively the same, but after a big storm, the amount of rainwater goes through the roof, and our sewage treatment plants can only take so much. When they become too full during a storm, they have to let this raw sewage and rainwater combo flow out into the sea. In 2017, 39 billion liters of this wastewater poured into our rivers and oceans in the lower mainland.
To me, that's really unfortunate, because the cause of all this is this rainwater that didn't have to go through the sewage treatment plant in the first place.
That's a lot of information, but what I'm trying to say is that creeks and rivers are nature's way of taking care of the rain. They collect the water, let some of it seep into the ground, and gradually take it out to the ocean, all without ever needing to use a single pipe. Oh, and I'm totally understating this, but they're also like habitats for ecosystems. Yay, nature. Well, recently, these rivers might be making a comeback. The city is currently undertaking a project in New Brighton Park which would bring back Hastings Creek, a stream that was once underground. In fact, there are studies and initiatives to bring back streams all over Vancouver, such as St. George Street, Gishon Creek, Tatlau and Volunteer Park, and yeah, maybe even China Creek. And Vancouver isn't alone. Cities all over the world are bringing underground rivers back to the surface in a process that many are calling daylighting. One of my favorite examples is in Seoul, Korea, where a river that was once underneath the highway was brought back up to the surface to create a park and a habitat for fish. I have to be honest though, the reality is that there's no easy way to do this. Bringing back most of these rivers would essentially involve tearing up existing roads and buildings. In fact, I would safely assume that we're never going to get all of Vancouver's streams and rivers back in their original state.
But I don't think that's the point. I think projects like these are part of a much larger shift in the way that we think about nature and the city. It's recognizing that our concrete and engineered solutions often kind of suck when compared to processes that our environment has evolved over thousands, maybe millions of years. These streams and rivers might have once been considered a nuisance, but now we're realizing that maybe they deserve to see the light of day.